Look, I need to get real with you today. There are some short-term and long-term trends that if you don't pay attention to them, you are going to get swiped off your feet. It's going to hurt real bad. The good news is if we pay attention and if we align ourselves in the right direction, we're going to do just fine. I'm going to give you that information right here today. Simply by looking at it, you'll be able to identify where the problems are and how we create our own solutions for ourselves and our families. All of that truth here today. The very first thing I want to talk about is what's happening short term. You're probably seeing this in the news already. France mobilizes tens of thousands of police to head off unrest. This had been happening over the past couple days. As I record this video, I've seen a lot of these different videos that have been coming up all over the internet. I've been seeing a lot of stuff. It's chaos. We had all the protests before this with the yellow vests, and so many different things have happened just in this one country. That's France. And you look at all these other countries that have come before this. And it's not just one city, even inside of France. It is all over the place. Now we can see one city at a time, one country at a time burn. And what I wrote about back in 2017, on the back cover of my book, it says, "Soon the earth will rumble under the heels of the angry mobs." I was not trying to be, just to get attention. That had nothing to do with it. Because I was able to foresee what we are looking at here, it is imperative that we get wise to it. And what am I saying? This information, while we'll see one thing or another, people are going to freak out when they have nothing left. They are going to do all these things. And it's a simple matter of fact. I've been looking at this a while, and I see it in every single case. While we do see prosperity in these places of prosperity, we get less criminal activity, we get less problems happening, we get less unemployment, we get, all of the, let's say, negative aspects. Those don't show up in the news. I'm not talking about this particular instance. I'm just saying the more prosperity we have, generally the better people are. They're buffered from any circumstance. However, when we create these inflationary bubbles, people get really hurt and we encounter problems like we are seeing here. I've got this one, office building occupancy as a percentage of pre-2020 levels. Houston 62%, Chicago 54%, New York 50%, LA 50%, San Francisco 45%. What I'm trying to show you here is that maybe, just perhaps, they built too much to begin with. That's what happens when you create these easy money policies. Eventually, you get hit hard. Eventually, you have a problem. And guess what? We haven't even faced the music yet, because a lot of these loans are coming due and they don't have their tenants. So one aspect of this is that we have civil unrest. It could come from one reason or another, but certainly that's what happens in any boom and bust cycle. Some people do get hurt when we have that bust. The second part of that, as we move in on the economic side, is to look at, where I believe is the weakest link right now, commercial real estate, all in line, because this is part of the whole inflationary boom and bust. It's all part of a cycle. The most likely economic scenario is a boil the frog recession featuring a synchronized global hard landing in 2024. That's the most likely, according to JPMorgan. Now, we don't know what's going to happen, but I just found it to be interesting. Now, if stocks continued their, ascent up to Mount Everest as they are now, by the time that there would be let's say a hard landing in 2024, chaos in the markets and so on, even if it was down 50%, we are still in a very good position. So I just want to make that very clear. But economically, very different scenario. Jobs are at risk. Okay? Part of this inflationary boom and bust. You see it happening all the time. And that's why I point the finger at the central bankers. It is very clear that they are doing this intentionally in order to make sure that you stay under their control. It's hard to believe and it's hard to piece together, but that is in fact the truth. Now I want to show you something else. Fed's Powell, we are still monitoring the bank situation very carefully. That's right. The banking crisis isn't over. And of course, once again, what I'm telling you here is that we have, in part with the increasing interest rates, it takes time for that to feel the effect in these different companies, depending on their exposure level to the higher interest rates that we're dealing with now, and so on. Inflation goes up, they take care of it by increasing interest rates. Suddenly, we have a problem. If people don't have the money to buy the essentials, they're going to be upset. They're going to be on the streets. So we see that, okay? These are all short-term issues, and long-term in a sense, but we're facing them short-term. Money supply, many people have been talking about this. I wanted to clarify, when we look at the money supply, there's two things. There's the year-over-year change, which definitely looks very drastic, as you see on the chart. But there's also the total money supply, M2, declining, which looks less significant. However, it is historically significant. So what I'm showing you is a decline year over year. Now, when we go 2020 into 2021, the amount of money that they printed was just ridiculous. So year over year, certainly we are looking at that as being very skewed, coming off of what we saw. But I need to make it clear, the money supply right now, as it stands, that's part of all the stimulus. And so if they're taking that stimulus away, the lifeblood of the financial system is being taken away. And that, therefore, it cannot actually sustain itself. It needs this constant and never-ending stimulus. It's like an alcoholic that wakes up in the morning, oh my goodness, I got a hangover. Let me reach for that bottle I had and take another swig because that's going to resolve this issue. Or somebody who's real tired, oh, I haven't slept in 2 days. Let me have an espresso so that I can wake up again. No, your body needs to sleep and rest, what I call an economic detox in this case here, but instead we just keep pumping it with stimulants. So that's our short-term problems. Now we go a little bit long-term. In connection with all of this financial wizardry and hocus pocus, we have the debt problem. The US debt is expected to soar to historic levels over the next 30 years, eventually reaching 181% of the country's total economic output, the GDP, even after the Republicans drove a high-stakes standoff this spring to secure what they described as a major improvement in the nation's fiscal health. That's pretty funny. But anyway, you know, and I know, that there's no question that the debt will expand considerably. What it's going to be at, we don't know. But every single crisis, they expand it. That's what happens. So in the long term, we have a very big debt problem. That's one thing. In connection with that, the US dollar, as it stands today, won't be where it is 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and so on. We have the rise of the BRICS nations. We have the power that China has certainly expanded to economically, going left, right, and center to do everything they can. This is in conjunction with that, talking about the BRICS and so on. The BRICS countries have been pursuing a wide range of initiatives to decrease their dependence on the dollar. Over the past year, Russia, China, Brazil have turned to greater use of non-dollar currencies in their cross-border transactions. Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and UAE are actively exploring dollar alternatives. And central banks have sought to shift more of their currency reserves away from the dollar and into gold. Yes, it is true that overwhelmingly, the US dollar is used in most transactions around the world. I could bring a US dollar to pretty much any country and they would accept it. They would know how to deal with that. However, little anecdotal information. I remember I went to, I don't remember which country it was, somewhere, I don't know if it was Mexico or somewhere in the Caribbean. I remember bringing my Canadian loonies and toonies with me, okay? And I guess it was in my wallet, and then I ran out of bills for the tip. They were cleaning the room in the resort. And so I said, okay, what do I have? So I had $3, a toonie and a loonie. I left that on the table, wrote a little note, thank you. That's what I had. Okay, there you go. Interestingly enough, all the other days that they were cleaning, I was leaving, let's say, whatever, a few dollars, but in paper bills. And they took that. But the Canadian toonies and loonies, they literally left it there. They didn't even take it. It was like worthless to them. So the US dollar is certainly reigning supreme. That's just a little bit of a funny story. Apparently, people don't think the loonies and toonies have any value, but perhaps they couldn't exchange it or what have you. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was, monopoly money. I'm just trying to tell you that, yes, in fact, that's the case. But when we look long-term down the horizon, it's a different story. Big news, publishers look to team up to address the impacts of AI. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, News Corp, Dotdash, Meredith owner AIC are among the companies discussing forming a coalition. Let's gather together so that we can somehow prevent the damage that will be done from AI. National Geographic lays off its last remaining staff writers. AI, artificial intelligence. Fire chief warns against unleashing self-driving taxis in San Francisco, basically saying that this is causing havoc. So it's not perfect, but guess what? They are doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway. We don't stand a chance against these things. Artificial intelligence is coming. It's already here, and the companies are just pouring their billions of dollars into it, and they're saying, we are going to do whatever it takes to get that AI as part of these previously, human tasks. We're going to do it. So that's the disruption here over the longer term. You got debt problems. You got reserve currency issues. You've got artificial intelligence. These things are massively going to disrupt your life over the long term. And then I look at something else. Check it out. The control, the level of control that they have, and major changes. Okay, as fuel taxes plummet, statewide charging by the mile instead of the tank. So I'm also, suggesting this and saying, hey, if you buy an electric car, well, then you're not going to be getting your fuel tax, obviously. So we're going to just put this chip in your car, and then we can tax you for every mile driven. And those taxes, are they just going to increase them at will? Are they going to limit your ability to move from one place to another based on your affordability? Oh no, I can't go today. I've run out of my allotment. That's the kind of thing that worries me, okay? The government spends so much money. They create all this stimulus. They create the imbalances and the differences between the rich and poor. We have to understand it. The government's doing this. Okay, and let's say the not so government, Federal Reserve and other central banks in conjunction together, they are doing this. All of the things that I talked about today, they are doing it. But I gotta make you understand something. When I hear people say, we've got to pay taxes, our tax money, yeah, maybe some of it, whatever, it's not the best thing, but as long as we get the right president in charge, as long as we get the right mayor of our city, everything's going to be a-okay. Well, I'm here to tell you that that isn't the case. Would you like to know why? Would you like to know why? Look at this. This is just one small example. U.S. government pays $51,600 for a $300 trash can as American debt crosses $32 trillion. You got to understand this. Yes, you could make excuses for why that $300 trash can is worth more than $300. You got the workers involved. You got all that. You can sing that song all day long. I'm not listening. Okay? I'm not going to listen to that because this is utter corruption. And we will see this not in one city or another. We're going to see it widespread all over the place, because even if it is in this case here with trash cans, we're going to see it in terms of, the military industrial complex, the lobbying, and the way they do this, and the way they're able to pass laws that benefit all these multi-billion-dollar and now trillion-dollar corporations at your expense. That's what's going on today. What about this? Just a little bit of humor, but also tying it in. Handbag smaller than a grain of salt sells for over $65,000. If you can't tell, that's somebody's finger. You're looking at their fingerprint, and there's this little tiny green thing at the end of it, and that's a handbag that they apparently did some sort of special process for 3D printing, made this thing, sold it for $63,000. I can't help but feel like it's kind of like an NFT. I guess it is still physical, but it seems weird. The point is, we got disparity, we've got these wild things that are happening, and this is kind of like peak craziness, I guess. I don't know, but I just want to show that to you. Well, I talked about all these things. I talked about the chaos. I looked at the short term and the long term, but you, the individual, you have to prepare. If you do that, if you follow the pillars of prosperity, you're going to do better than 99.9% of people, because people are oblivious. People have their heads in the sand, and they usually choose one thing. They'll usually say, I'm just going to work at this job, and my job's going to be steady, and my job's not going to be taken out by AI, and I'm going to be okay because my health is going to stay good all the way until 100 years old. I won't have any disruptions in my work. I don't need to worry about that. Or my 401k where I haven't invested is going to be totally fine for the next 50 years. You've got to start to actually lose faith in what you've been told and start to open your eyes to the reality of the circumstances we are in today. The pillars of prosperity teach you that. I hope you will check it out right here. Click that link, and I'll see you there.